Welcome to Trent University's 7th annual 3-minute paper competition, the virtual edition. First, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that Trent University sits on the treaty and traditional territory of the Michi-Sagi Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. 3-Minute Paper, or 3MP, is an annual event coordinated by Academic Skills and the colleges at Trent University. We are so pleased you can join us for our celebration of undergraduate research at Trent in this video. My name is Erin Stewart-Eves. I'm an Academic Skills instructor. I'm one of the organizers of this event, and I'm proud Trent alum too. I am grateful that I get to continue my role as MC in this year's annual event. 3MP was inspired by an international graduate level competition called 3-Minute Thesis. That was developed at the University of Queensland in Australia more than a decade ago. And in that challenge, just like this challenge, student researchers have to distill their work in an engaging and accessible presentation in only 3 minutes or 180 seconds. This year, we've relieved participants of the anxiety related to the live presentation, but they have this added technical challenge of recording their presentation in a single take. We've compiled their video presentations for this video event. In this video, we'll hear about projects from a range of disciplines, from chemistry to history, psychology and economics, to biology and child and youth studies. The participants have conducted research in honors theses, community research projects, and major papers as part of their course requirements. These are complex and insightful projects. In fact, each presentation represents months of lab work, data analysis, comprehensive review of the literature, and countless hours of Zoom meetings. Makes us all tired just thinking about it. Trent administrators, faculty, and my colleagues in Trent's career space will agree that 3MP presenters demonstrate essential transferable skills that employers demand of new graduates. They can translate difficult concepts for us, speak it to us in plain language that's accessible, and engage us in a meaningful story about their research and its value. And they usually make us want to learn more. These are all important skills. Because this is a competition, we've set out some ground rules for the presenters. First, their presentations have to be recorded in one take, and as the name of the competition suggests, they only have 3 minutes. Any presentations that exceed 3 minutes are disqualified. The presentations have to be spoken word, so we're not going to hear any rapping or singing today, or poetry either. The presentations can be supported by 3 images or slides. But presenters can't use props, music, or any other electronic media to support their talk. In this competition, presenters may use notes or cue cards to support their work. This isn't an easy task. They don't have any fun digital bells and whistles to use, and they still need to inform us and engage us. So you might ask, why are these students going through this? Why would they want to do it? But these aren't your average undergraduate students. They are very enthusiastic about research. And they told me that they are doing this because they love sharing what they've learned. Participants are also proudly representing their departments and their home at Trent, their college. So we've got participants from all of the colleges and campuses at Trent. We have participants from Trent Durham GTA, from Champlain College, Lady Eaton College, Peter Zosky College, Autonomy College, and Catherine Parr Trail College. So it's a great representation, great mix tonight. All of these participants are also competitors. They are competing for cash prizes that have been generously sponsored by departments at Trent. These prizes are based on scores given by judges on the following criteria. First, language and communication. Was the research and its significance communicated in a language appropriate to an intelligent but non-specialist audience? Second, knowledge and understanding. Did the presentation help the audience understand the complexity of the research? 3, engagement. Did the presentation make the audience want to learn more? 4, visual aids. Are the PowerPoint slides visually interesting illustrations of key ideas in the presentation? These criteria are all weighted and lead to the prizes that we have generously sponsored by departments at Trent University. So our overall prize is $150, and it has been sponsored by the Office of Research. Our first runner-up prize has been sponsored by Alumni Affairs. Our second runner-up prize is from the Center for Teaching and Learning. And all 3 of those prizes are based on equally weighted criteria. The Best Visuals Prize, sponsored by the Office of the President, is determined by the highest cumulative score on visual aids. And the Audience Choice Prize, sponsored by the Office of the President, is determined by you, our audience. So I'll give you more details on that at the end of the video. This year, we're very lucky to have 3 esteemed members of the Trent University community to act as judges. They're watching the live premiere tonight and scoring each presenter on their ability to engage us and inform us in their research story. So we welcome and express our gratitude to Marilyn Burns, Vice President of Communications and Enrollment, Michael Kahn, Provost and Vice President Academic, and Trent's Chancellor, Stephen Stone, also Trent graduate, class of 1966. And I think they're patiently waiting, like you, for these presentations to begin. So I've had a sneak peek of the presentations, and I promise you, you'll be impressed by all of the students competing tonight. Enjoy.
Hi there, my name is Miranda Scaberis. I'm an economics major studying out of Zosky College, and today I'm going to talk to you about factors in securing employment. Have you ever thought about your job? Have you ever thought about the fact that it may or may not be secure? That the flip of a coin can make you go from in-person to online? Well, when COVID-19 struck, this impacted a lot of people. My research focused on individuals from the Haliburton County and Kawartha area. The reason why this is so important is because not everyone has the same access to technology. Not everyone has the same access to employment. Not everyone has these ability to do what they need to do and find what they need to find. When taking a hold of this project, I wanted to find different ways that employment was impacted due to COVID-19. Working with the community, I was able to find that technology, age, location play a massive factor. If your internet is unstable, you may not be able to watch that YouTube video. But could you imagine not being able to do your job and losing a form of income just due to where you live? Well, after multiple surveys, interviews, and conducting literary research, I was able to figure out that there are barriers to employment and that COVID-19 did impact it. That $2,000 of CERB did impact some individuals, but it may be less income for others, as it would have been more for some. That technology is a main barrier, but there might be other reasons that we might not have thought of both before. The reason I'm talking about this to you today is because of the importance of acknowledging that there are barriers in employment and that we could all be given an equal option, but there might not be an equitable solution. Due to COVID-19, individuals were forced to stay at home. The technology rise within the home is increasing. More individuals are working remotely than ever before, and the shift in need is actually changing. Research suggests that individuals who previously would have worked with in person are now going to work from home permanently. The shift of employment and the expectation that working remotely is now necessary. That if you didn't have internet previously, it's now needed. That if you don't have a phone, it's now required. If you didn't have a computer, it's time to find one. Now, how about if you didn't have the money for this? How about if you didn't have the funds to be able to afford this new lifestyle that's required? Well, my research looked at different ways that individuals would have to go about this. You can't get a laptop if you don't have the money to pay for it, and you can't get the money without getting a job. My project looks at different ways that employment is secured. If hiring offices and other areas in the community are closed, this does limit your way of attaining a job. If you're unable to communicate with people, you might not be able to have the same access as you previously did before. The reason this research is so important is because it's important to see that not everyone has the same opportunity, even though that there's an equal solution for all.
Hello, my name is Sydney. I am a forensic science and biology student affiliated with Autonomy College. The title of my presentation today is Characterization of Pathogenesis Driver of Ustulatomatus, Corn Killer. Ustulatomatus causes common corn smut, a disease that is named after the sooty spores that are found in late-stage infections. Endemic to North America, this disease causes millions of dollars of corn crop loss each year. And as Western diets rely heavily on cereal crops, this is a disease that should be of interest to us all. My research question focused around the idea of what genes drive pathogenesis in Ustulatomatus. Pathogenesis is the development of a disease within a host. So my question then became a little bit more broad. What allows for the infection to rage on within those corn plants? And the answer lies in part in transcription factors. Transcription factors are proteins that can bind DNA and alter gene expression in one of two ways. It can either act as a repressor, or similar to a brake for a moving vehicle, or it can act as an activator, and it would act more similar to a gas pedal. Now, my project was specifically looking at no-leaf tumor 1, a previously identified gene that is a potential regulator of pathogenesis within Ustulatomatus. I was creating a deletion complementation of NLT1. Essentially, I took a cell that had already had NLT1 deleted out of it, and I reintegrated one copy of NLT1 under the control of a constitutive promoter. So this is a promoter that is always on. You can think of it similarly to if you were to lay a brick on a gas pedal. The gas is constantly flowing to the engine, similar to how my gene would constantly be expressed. Now, having successfully reintegrated my gene back into this deletion mutant, the next step was to infect corn. And this was done by injecting the corn seedlings with the fungus. And I had compared the rate, the development, and the severity of this infection between the wild type as well as my mutant. And what I had found was that although the wild type could elicit these major symptoms such as severe leaf tumors and stem tumors as shown in the photos, my deletion complementation mutant was unable to elicit much of any symptoms whatsoever. And so this was suggestive of the fact that this gene can act as a repressor when overly expressed in the early stages of infection and essentially shuts the whole process down. And previous data from our lab has shown that it is required for late stage infections. So putting together, this data suggests that this gene ultimately holds two jobs, and it also informs my question that this is a little bit more complex than just one gene acting as the main driver of pathogenesis within a host system.
I'm Meghna Raghavan, and I'm a psychology major from the Durham campus. My topic is Agree to Disagree, Parent-Child Discrepancies in Addiction Treatment. 15 to 24, that's the age group with the highest rates of addiction. Substance abuse during adolescence can be extremely harmful because it has a number of negative short-term and long-term consequences. Research has taught us that family functioning, which includes the quality of the parent-child relationship, can help prevent addiction. Adolescence, however, is notoriously a time when parents and children don't see eye to eye. But what if they don't even agree on how much they disagree? When substance use disorders are being diagnosed, reports are taken from multiple people, including parents and the adolescents themselves. Since they're talking about the same behavior, you'd expect them to say similar things. However, disagreements between reports or discrepancies are very common. These discrepancies used to be written off as mistakes or inconveniences, but recent research suggests that we can learn important information from them. For example, a study showed that when parents and children disagreed on the levels of parental monitoring displayed, those disagreements predicted delinquent behavior in the future. That discrepancy was able to tell us something that individual reports couldn't. My research focuses on parent-child discrepancies in reports of family functioning. I'm using data from an adolescent addiction treatment center with a family-focused approach. This means that they work with the adolescent to decrease substance use and with the parents to improve family functioning. I'm comparing discrepancies in parent and adolescent reports of family functioning before and after treatment. I'm still analyzing data, but here's what I expect to see. I expect that parent-child discrepancies will decrease after treatment, meaning that there will be greater agreement on the quality of their relationship. I also predict that adolescents with larger increases in agreement will experience better treatment outcomes. These results would have important implications. To begin with, they would validate the efficacy of the treatment center's family-focused approach. It would also add to the growing research on discrepancy scores and confirm that there's so much more than inconveniences we should ignore. There are additional data points we could be utilizing. While disagreements between adolescents and parents are common, this research suggests that families who are on the same page in terms of feeling accepted, being able to communicate openly, and trusting each other may provide protection for adolescents at risk of substance abuse. Simply being able to agree on the quality of their relationship could help prevent addiction. So parents and children can agree to disagree, and we can use those disagreements to improve our research and our practices. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Emily Levesque. I'm a fourth-year student at Trent University, Durham, completing my Bachelor of Arts and Honors in the Child and Youth Studies stream. My work is entitled, It's Not Just Something to Do, The Impacts of Creative Art Therapy. Currently, I'm a dancer as well as a dance instructor, and up until recently, I was living with some undiagnosed mental health issues that I never truly knew how to deal with. I always just poured myself into dance and used it as an outlet for myself. I see a lot of my students doing the same thing, pouring themselves, their heart, and their thoughts and feelings into their dance and movements. It's truly inspiring. Ever since COVID hit, there's been a huge impact on us as a studio. However, this has really pushed me to look further into exactly what the impacts of creative arts have and what are some of the benefits of using creative arts as a therapy. So creative art therapy is a combination of art and psychotherapy in which people can express themselves, their emotions, their thoughts, and their ideas on topics that would normally be more difficult for them to talk about. Some of the major findings I've found upon my research include positive benefits regarding mental health and well-being. First of all, creative art therapy is a very well-rounded form of therapy that is fun and engaging. It's educational as you learn about yourself, others, and the art itself, and it's also healing to the mind and body. Also, there have been significant improvements in many mental illnesses, including anxiety, such as generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, as well as separation anxiety disorder. Another major finding that I found in my research includes the promotion of a sense of belonging. Social functionality and identity formation were found to be significantly increased after participation in creative arts. This is because they create a very welcoming and safe environment in which individuals can form bonds and friendships with others who have similar interests. Also, the formation of identity and personal transformation were significantly higher after participation. This is because individuals can engage in exploration of themselves and take safe risks in environments they feel safe in. So why is it relevant? Well, people are very complex. Therefore, we need to ensure that we have a variety of help and a variety of resources that can accommodate these complexities. Also, creative arts are very common in the lives of many. For example, people take dance lessons when they're young, perhaps engage in musicals or learning to play a musical instrument, as well as art and drawing. Therefore, it's something that a lot of people are comfortable with and engage in all the time. I want to thank you for your time today. I hope that I was able to shed some light on other impacts that creative arts can have on an individual besides just giving them something to do. It's not just about physical wellness, it's also about the mind. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carly Davenport. I'm a biomedical science student with Zoonotic College. The title of my project is SARS-CoV-2 Gone Wild, the reverse zoonotic spread into wildlife populations. I should start by admitting that I'm not studying ecology, which might seem confusing because I'm here talking to you about the spread of SARS-CoV-2 to wildlife, but allow me to explain. For a reading course, I wrote and presented a lit review on the reverse zoonotic spread of SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-2 being the virus that causes COVID-19. We know that the virus emerged of zoonotic origin, meaning that we know it came from a very similar virus in an animal species. I won't weigh in on what animal species. Instead, what I want to highlight is why these spillover events occur. Up on my slide, we see a big list of problems, and these are all things that are familiar to us. We know about climate change, we know about urbanization, deforestation, increased interaction between livestock and wildlife, frequent international travel, social inequalities, and we absolutely know about health system failures right now. All of those are factors that contribute to the emergence and spread of novel pathogens in human populations. So it's a big list of problems, and each on its own is a worthy cause to champion. So why should we care about the reverse zoonotic spread of SARS-CoV-2? Well, the simple answer is that if we don't, the cycle will continue. The virus will establish a new reservoir and one day find a new intermediate host to spill back over to the human population, probably with enough mutations to cause problems for whatever intervention we have, be it vaccine or antiviral. So the perspective I want to share is that SARS-CoV-2 and viruses that came before it, like Ebola, HIV, SARS, MERS, they all came from animal viruses because of that big list of problems. And yes, I think that those are each their own problem, and we could categorize them and separate them. But ultimately, why? What do we gain from separating human health from animal health, from environmental health, when we know that they're all connected? If we do nothing to change our approach and behavior, the literature says that novel viruses like SARS-CoV-2 will continue to emerge. So imagine if we didn't categorize and separate the contributing factors. What if we took a One Health approach where public health, medicine, vet medicine, research, and wildlife rehab all worked collaboratively? Think of the effect this could have on surveillance, and think of the effect that a unified infection prevention and control strategy could have. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marissa Pucci. I'm an environmental science student affiliated with Lady Eaton College, and my project is titled, Can GIS Do More? A Theoretical Application to GIS in the Project Development Process. My professor once mentioned to me that a map is meaningless until you provide it with meaning. Why can't a map act as a tool to be able to visually represent environmental project-related concerns? More specifically, concerns held by community stakeholders that go overlooked in a project development's consultation process. GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, have already been used in a wide variety of applications. This can be as complicated as climate change prediction models, or something super simple like you picking up your smartphone and GPSing your way to your home. But I believe that GIS has the potential to do more. In order to effectively address these environmental concerns with stakeholders such as Indigenous communities, members of the public, organizations, etc., I have developed a 5-step consultation process that uses GIS as a knowledge translation tool in order to produce a map that directly focuses on the environmental concerns. This was accomplished by applying a theoretical approach to a pre-existing gold mine project called Spring Pool, which is located in Red Lake, Ontario. Within the scenario I created, I drew the environmental concerns from the executive report, determined how I would go about collecting the data, and how to best translate this information into a useful GIS map within the following 5-step process. This would be including consulting our stakeholders, getting to engage with them and gaining their perspective, gathering the necessary data to be able to graphically represent their concerns, creating maps that draw spatial relationships between the project development and the stakeholder, going back and making sure that everything was captured and addressed properly, revising if necessary, and presenting this in land-based claims, court cases, or consultation periods. Addressing the need for a more collaborative consultation process offers both exciting and ambitious potential for improved environmental communication. It will require many resources, including funding, experts, and time. However, I believe that these maps provide us with the opportunity to strengthen knowledge translation through the use of GIS. Indeed, GIS offers a more accessible and effective method of educating individuals of the lasting impacts of project development. Therefore, my consultation process would incorporate meaningful and informed consultation amongst stakeholders. Through a creative implementation of GIS, an innovative visual tool can be offered to better understand concerns related to a project. Moreover, this map creation process will act as a bridge between environmental communication and community engagement.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nicole Leach. I am a passionate chemistry student proudly affiliated with Zoonotic College, and the title of my presentation is Why Choosing a Sunscreen is Still an Enigma, a Chemical Approach to Effective Decision Making. We all use sunscreens to protect ourselves from ultraviolet light, which causes sunburn, aging, and skin cancer. But how much do we really know about the active ingredients used in our sunscreens? And is it enough to make an informed decision as a sunscreen consumer? Sunscreens contain active ingredients, which are either organic or inorganic chemicals. The organic ingredients absorb the UV light before your skin can, while the inorganic ingredients physically block the UV light, causing it to reflect away. Although sunscreens are vital for skin protection, emerging research, including mine, has identified negative health and environmental impacts. However, it's unclear how impacts such as these affect consumer choice during purchase. For my research, I'm investigating if students with a background in chemistry are able to identify chemical markers in these products, and if the information is adequate and accessible for making informed decisions. With Ethics Board approval, I reached out to past and present Trent chemistry students who had completed courses in analytical, organic, inorganic, and green chemistry. Students were asked to voluntarily participate in this study, where I provided consenting students with information about the chemical active ingredients from the multiple aspects of chemistry they were familiar with. Students then answered survey questions relating to those active ingredients after they had reviewed those data sheets. Their responses were taken anonymously and then they were analyzed. Only 57% of students knew that sunscreens were considered to be drugs regulated by Health Canada. This could be why 76% of students only factor in SPF value and price when purchasing a sunscreen. But as a result of my research on human health and environmental impacts of sunscreen active ingredients, which I presented to students, there's a clear shift in the perception of the students from purchasing a sunscreen based only on function and price to incorporating the human health and environmental impacts in their decision. 23% of students incorporated these impacts at the beginning of the study compared to 73% at the end. This shows that when presented with data critical to making effective decisions, students are able to recognize the implications these active ingredients have on humans and the environment. However, this data is still not easily accessible in language that's understood by everyone. 100% of students believe that it's concerning when no such data is available to them during purchase. I'm calling on sunscreen brands to include multi-chemical knowledge in their sunscreen products to make information easily accessible, and I'm calling on you to do your research before you get to the store. That way you have adequate knowledge to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Next up, Kelly Campbell. She's a Champlain student studying chemistry, and her presentation is titled, analyzing a brighter future, from a nuisance to a blessing.
What are your initial thoughts when you see the following images? I'll be honest, I'm not a historian, so I don't automatically see the potential historical importance of such an artifact. I am, however, a chemist, so while I can't explain what you see on the surface, I can tell you what secrets are hidden beneath. My name is Kelly, and I've spent last semester researching something called synchrotron radiation. And after reading numerous research articles and a host of textbooks, I'm here to share with you an example of the sheer applicability of synchrotron analysis. Synchrotron radiation is a light 1 billion times brighter than the light emitted from the surface of the sun. As charged electrons are accelerated to nearly the speed of light within a facility which is the size of an NFL football stadium, they are bent by high-powered magnets to produce beams of X-rays. These X-rays can then be used to characterize atomic and molecular structures of a wide variety of sample types. The Synchrotron facility is a busy scientific hub running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So why do scientists wait with eagerness for months to get a chance at working in such a facility? In my review of the literature, I have uncovered many uses of synchrotron radiation ranging from chemical to biological to historical. One example where the synchrotron radiation shone was in the study of the 10th century document known as the Archimedes Palimpsest, an early transcription of work done by the Archimedes, later converted to a Greek prayer book and containing additional 20th century forgeries, such as the painting you now see on screen. To the naked eye, the original Archimedes text survives only ghostly outlines. Scientists wishing to enhance the underlying text exploited the chemical composition of the inks in both the original text and the overlying prayer book through synchrotron X-ray fluorescence analysis. During the time of the book's creation, the use of an iron bell ink was commonplace. As such, the synchrotron instrument was tuned to detect the X-ray fluorescence signal of the iron within the ink. Suddenly, not only the prayer book writing was visible, but so was the underlying, much older Archimedes text, which was found to run perpendicularly. In fact, the overlap of the two texts where the iron was present on the page was seen in the form of an enhanced iron fluorescence signal. In the end, scientists identified 7 Archimedes treaties, including the only surviving original Greek copy of the On Floating Bodies, plus 2 additional treaties never seen before. This just goes to show, if you want to reveal the hidden secrets of history, call a chemist and we'll turn the lights on for you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kayla Moore, and I am currently a Child and Youth Studies major at Trent University, Durham, and this is my presentation titled Canada's Secret Shame, Understanding Sex-Trafficked Youth in Canada. Prior to my undergraduate studies, I had little to no information on the issue of human trafficking. I felt that this was a problem that would never impact the people I knew or the places I traveled. Not only is this incredibly false, but majority of Canada's sex trafficking cases are happening right here in Southern Ontario. As I've learned through my research, sex trafficking involves recruitment, transportation, harboring, and/or exercising control in order to exploit that person for traffickers' gain. Specific numbers related to human trafficking cases are incredibly difficult to know for sure, but it is suggested that there are 4.5 million individuals that are trafficked worldwide, with many victims being recruited as young as 11 or 12 years old. Approximately 70% of trafficking instances in our country are occurring in Ontario, and roughly 80% of those cases are in Southern Ontario, mostly the GTA. Almost all of these victims are women and children, and approximately 28% are under the age of 18. Traffickers often create an elusive but profitable business that's easily transitional to avoid their offenses. Media reports suggest that when this activity becomes threatened or investigated, the traffickers can simply move further down our 401 to another location where they can continue unnoticed. This business becomes more profitable than selling substances, as pimps can resell one product or girl several times over and over. These pimps are not always who you might expect and can be peers, intimate partners, even trusted loved ones or guardians. And unfortunately, these pimps can also be victims themselves. The crime is a consistent violation of fundamental human rights. It's taking control over an individual's body, sexuality, and livelihood. When doing my literature review, it was clear that these horrific experiences leave youth victims with a long list of potential impacts that encompass their physical, mental, and social health. These can include broken bones, brain injuries, various mental illnesses, disassociation, and instinctive mistrust, and can leave youth at a greater risk for re-trafficking. Instead of labeling youth victims with a series of disorders, we instead need to participate in a trauma-informed approach and conceptualize their struggles as responses to coping with trauma. As a student who's majoring in child and youth studies, it's my responsibility to have an understanding of the issues and experiences that impact our youth. I believe we all have this responsibility. These impacts can only be explained by survivors themselves, and it's been through my studies that I've noticed a gap in the literature. We need to be asking ourselves, what can we do to help? The more we research, the better informed we are as a public body and as policymakers. It's because of recent research that Canadian government has put forth a $307 million plan over the next 5 years for anti-trafficking strategies and survivor support. By completing my research, it helps professionals support our own community's youth, and I want to do my part in making these contributions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Neha Rapratab. I'm an Autonomy College affiliated student pursuing a thesis in forensic science, and the title of my presentation is Gnats versus Mitochondria, the Fight for Power in Fungal Pathogenesis. Did you know that mRNA exists outside of viruses and vaccines? They exist in fungal pathogens like Eumatis, which causes common corn smut infection across the world. Now, mRNA is like our final draft of our assignment we're about to submit. We can all agree that you can't telepathically translate your thoughts and ideas to your professors as an assignment. You have to take your abstract ideas from your brain and translate it into a physical document which you can submit. DNA is much like our abstract thoughts. It has a set of instructions for all cells, but is not in an accessible or workable form. mRNA is the translated workable form of these instructions that can be sent outside of the cell to the appropriate manufacturing power plants and produce the molecules such as proteins and mitochondria. This is like your final draft you're about to submit, which you can submit and get grading because you've now successfully translated your abstract thoughts into something physical and workable. Now, my thesis is focusing on mRNA and RNA molecules that have the instructions for mitochondria. So I'll be looking at both mitochondrial activity and the metabolism behind Eumatis infection and growth. Now, I hope you're ready to rumble because I present to you natural antisense transcripts, aka NATs, which are RNA molecules which can turn genes on and off. And what this does is it influences what set of instructions are leaving the cell and therefore what molecules are being produced. Now, its opponent, the almighty powerhouse, mitochondria, is responsible for providing the energy and fuel behind proper growth and infection in corn. Now, if we're going on a little trip and in our car, we are the mRNA molecule with the set of instructions for producing mitochondria, then our final destination is the manufacturing plant, which will provide the metabolism and fuel for growth and infection. And what I've done in my research is essentially add all these roadblocks and checkpoints, which are my NAT molecules, and this can control traffic. So I can either result in early arrival or even delay the arrival of these instructions to provide the fuel needed for proper growth and infection. My research will provide insight on growth, mitochondrial activity and influence on pathogenesis, as well as the overall method of infection in Eumatis.
Hey, my name is Thomas Bodrug. I'm a psychology student affiliated with Autonomy College, and the title of my project is Exploring Students' Cognitive Complexity in Online Inquiry-Based Discussions, a Linguistic Analysis. I'm stuck. I've been challenged to condense my thesis into 3 minutes, but this almost becomes impossible when my topic is literally complex student thinking, or how differentiated and integrative students' ideas can be. psychology, we call this cognitive complexity. Let's take a look. It's true that higher order thinking, or the top tiers of Bloom's taxonomy, is something instructors strive to help their students achieve. But the shift to online learning was so sudden that instructors found themselves questioning how they could maintain this learning objective. And yes, discussion boards are a staple tool of online learning, but they alone don't really elicit that level of application, analysis, and synthesis required for cognitive complexity. On the other hand, we have something called inquiry-based learning, a method that is known to enhance higher order thinking. It challenges students to think deeper and more critically about the course content by applying material to real-life cases. The emphasis is on their thinking process. So what we were really interested in is, can we increase students' cognitive complexity in online discussion boards if we infuse them with inquiry-based activities, which is exactly what was done in a second-year psychology course at Trent. Okay, so how do we measure cognitive complexity? Well, if we think about the concept itself, every time we talk, every time we consider an idea or combine ideas together, we are showing cognitive complexity through our language. So in other words, we can measure cognitive complexity through our word choices, and in this case, the discussion board posts themselves. Dr. James Pennybaker developed a software called the Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count. And what it does is that it takes our everyday word choices and it categorizes them into distinct dimensions. Some of these happen to make up cognitive complexity. So imagine hundreds of discussion board posts all inputted into the software, and then it spits out the percentage of words used in each category. Analyses are still in progress, but we hope to find some validation that these linguistic categories are indeed useful tools for studying students' complex, higher order thinking. We also wanted to see whether participating in online discussion activities helps strengthen students' cognitive complexity over time, and of course, whether more complex thinking ultimately contributes to higher academic performance. Results of these studies will help inform effective instructional design for online learning and help post-secondary institutions foster a valuable and constructive educational experience. Thank you.
I'm Isaiah Heipel. I'm a psychology major at Trent University Peterborough campus, and the title of my thesis is The Impact of COVID-19 Restrictions on the Psychological Needs of Student Varsity Athletes. To start off, I want you to imagine that you're a member of a sports team who's used to training at least 5 days a week together, sometimes twice a day. On weekends, your team travels to games or tournaments. You work out in the gym with your teammates. You study in the library together. You do almost everything together. Members of your team have become your primary source for social support. You're a member and part of your team for your entire university experience. You even go so far as calling them part of your family. Now imagine having all of that taken away. Now you can't see each other at practices. You can't do strength training sessions in the weight room together. There are no games or tournaments, and you can't run in-person study groups or homework sessions with your teammates. There is limited data, however, research suggests that during the first stages of COVID-19, over half of a randomly sampled population rated the psychological impact as moderate to severe, with over 25% reporting moderate to severe anxiety symptoms. Despite these statistics, we know next to nothing about the impact of the virus on the psychological needs of varsity athletes. It is known that the satisfaction of one's psychological needs promotes optimal performance, increased levels of motivation, and better overall well-being. But COVID-19 has completely changed the landscape of student-athlete life. Environments such as practices, games, and team events were some of the first places impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. We are in a time when financial, social, and health-related insecurities are more prominent than most of us have ever seen. My research is focused on identifying some of the effects COVID-19 restrictions have had on varsity athletes here at Trent University. I am exploring the barriers faced by athletes who are currently impacted by COVID-19, how social cohesion between teammates have been affected, how leadership styles have adapted, and what student athletes feel has been most impacted during this time. Focus groups investigating the well-being of student athletes are revealing how COVID-19 may be widely affecting the student athlete population. Through inductive content analysis, I've begun to uncover themes such as supports, routine, and development-focused training, all of which promote higher levels of well-being in these athletes. Other emerging themes appear to differ depending on athletes' years of eligibility, while some appear consistently across both an athlete's year of eligibility and their sport classification. The results will not only provide insights into the impact of COVID-19, but will also shine a light on the importance of sports and the impact of losing it as a student athlete. This research is a starting point to identifying how COVID-19 has affected the population's psychological well-being and the policies and programs that can be developed to support people in a time of such uncertainty.
Hello, my name is Ayan Yazi. I'm a student in the biology program and affiliated with Lady Eden College. The title of my project is Proteins Behaving Badly. I hope you enjoy. You might be wondering, what makes a dancer similar to a protein? And these are not the proteins we eat, but that are actually found naturally in our body. Well, both can adopt different shapes. The dancer, using his or her body, gracefully transitions between different acrobatic shapes that each require extreme precision and coordination. By changing shapes, the dancer conveys meaning and provides a riveting performance. Similarly, the protein also transitions from one shape to another shape until it adopts a shape that allows it to perform a specific biological function. This protein, along with thousands of other proteins, work collectively with our cells and organs, enabling us to perform necessary functions such as hearing, eating, breathing, and moving. But what happens if both the dancer and protein cannot correctly perform a shape? For the dancer, it may harm their performance, but for the protein, it may affect our survival. What's more upsetting is that proteins are vulnerable to certain mutations that can force it to adopt a shape that actually causes it to attack our tissues and organs. Current research has found that 30 human proteins are capable of mutating this way. My research focuses on a protein called gelson. In its functional shape, it works to rid our bloodstream from toxins and provides an immune response against disease. However, mutations have been found to destabilize gelson, causing it to change from a functional shape to a toxic clump shape. Little research has been done on this mutation, but has found that the clump shapes deposit in the kidney, causing kidney disease and eventual failure. Other mutations associated with gelson have also been found to attack other tissues and organs. What makes these clump structures so deadly is that they're indestructible, and they continue to accumulate in the tissues and organs over a span of numerous years. So far, the prevalence of gelson-derived diseases is actually increasing and has been found to be common in the elderly. This can have a severe impact on the general population as it gets older. The question I attempt to understand in my thesis is how are these clump structures formed in the first place, and what conditions determine their formation? To test this, I will measure the tendency of gelson protein to produce clump structures. I will treat gelson protein containing the mutation to different environments, such as acidic pH, shaking, and chemicals. Each environment is like a different dancing style, as it will change the protein shape in a different way to encourage the formation of clump structures. The clump structures will then be measured based on how cloudy the sample is and will be observed using microscopy. I expect that an acidic environment will trigger the protein to produce these clump structures and result in the highest amount. Since I'll be testing at concentrations found in the human body, application of this study can help us understand and study further ways to inhibit this protein and help one day find a possible cure. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jenna Reed. I am an International Development Studies student associated with Otonabee College, and the title of my presentation is The Language of Development, Multilingualism in the Education System of Ghana. Can you imagine that you are newly enrolled in primary school and then taught in a language that no one in your community or your family speaks? Can you imagine that this places barriers between yourself, your community, your culture, and your family? Can you imagine that this hinders your potential academic achievements? This occurs frequently in the lower classes of Ghana. As a result of primary education policies which focus on English, social, economic, and political stratification has occurred, and cohesive Ghanaian development has been hindered. Language is instrumental to both education and identity. Education is instrumental to community development. Since declaring independence, Ghana has undergone rapid educational reform, with changes between curricula that focused on multilingualism and English in primary education. In Ghana, there are 73 indigenous and 8 non-indigenous languages, of which 14 national dialects have been declared. These all pertain to a particular geographic region, they all come from indigenous languages, and you guessed it, none of these include English. By moving away from Ghanaian dialects and towards English in education, English has become an elitist form of communication, available only to those whose parents can afford to send them to school. This has created friction between different Ghanaian social classes and has hindered cohesive national development. The prevalence of English in Ghana's education system has also diminished communal identification and eroded the importance of local language. This can be combated effectively by implementing community-based, inclusive schooling structures. These are capable of responding to issues that arise in education systems that impact different socioeconomic groups in different ways. Inclusive schooling strategies also encourage an increase in the participation of the community in the education system. This sees parents take a more active role in the education of their children because they can actually understand the material that's being taught. By implementing a community-based inclusive schooling strategy structured in local vernaculars, the differences in Ghanaian students can be both acknowledged and celebrated. This leads to preservation of local and group cultures and the development of more relevant pedagogy, which allows Ghanaian students to better connect with their cultural identities, with their cultural histories and heritage, and participate in national development as adults. Turning to multilingual education strategies based in inclusive ideas, in Ghana, supports national and local development by establishing the importance of local languages in the preservation of culture. Inclusive development requires inclusive education, and inclusive education requires the use of local languages. Thank you.
Hi, Sam Blondeau here. I am a joint sociology and child and youth major who's representing Trail College and Durham campus. My project is called Through Their Eyes, the Pandemic Perspective of Youth Experiencing Homelessness. Everybody watching is acutely aware of the global health pandemic that we've been experiencing for the last year. What I'm not so sure everyone's aware of are the social pandemics that we've been dealing with for decades. One of those is homelessness, and in Canada, 20% of the people who experience homelessness are youths aged 16 to 24. So that means tonight there's approximately 7,000 youths in Canada that don't have a safe place to call home. In Peterborough, it's the Peterborough Yes Shelter for Youth and Families, and they've been providing essential services for almost 2 decades, like emergency shelter, transitional housing, and a network of other things. I partnered with the Yes Shelter to talk to staff and youth about their pandemic perspective, but what I was really curious about was the use of creative expression. Because research has told us that when you provide marginalized youth with arts-based programming, that it increases their ability to develop positive coping skills. And the Yes Shelter has been providing an arts drop-in for 2 years out of the library. One of the staff members that I interviewed has been involved with that drop-in since it started. And she told me that when the pandemic hit, the 2 community members involved were adamant that the space go virtual so that the youth have a place to still connect, still get engaged in creative expression, and at the same time give them a sense of familiarity in a time of unprecedented social change. The youth that I got to talk to, Joey and Michaela, they had a really cool way of finding silver linings in the pandemic. Michaela is 19. She told me that the pandemic has been kind of bittersweet for her because she's been able to quiet the chatter in her mind and be able to figure out what her own personal goals are and what she needs to do and how to get there without worrying about what everybody else has to say about it. She also told me that prior to her time in transitional unit, she really enjoyed doing art. Her life just didn't afford her the possibility of doing it. So during lockdown, she's been writing and she's been painting and she's been sketching and she's been playing musical instruments. And she told me that she's been getting new perspectives because of the pandemic and she's been exploring them. And then there was Joey, 17-year-old trans art student, whose goal is one day to become an animator and go to art school. Joey told me that the pandemic's been rough. They've been having a hard time trying to find a job, and there's the added anxiety of possibly contracting the virus. So Joey's been spending a lot of time trying to work on their skills. Prior to the pandemic, they had thought about trying to sell their artwork, but they really didn't feel skilled enough. So after this time, and given the fact they couldn't find a job, they decided to open up commissions. And guess what? They sold 2 pieces of art during the pandemic. The smile on their face was amazing. See, this is the thing about research. Sometimes when we go into it with our questions, we get answers. And then other times we go in with questions and get more questions. And my question is, what can youth who are experiencing homelessness teach us about how to make the best of this pandemic mess that we have all found ourselves in? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Laura Passifium, and I am a history student affiliated with Varsity College. My research is titled Medieval Metheglin, More Than an Intoxicating Beverage. Thanks to the increased popularity of the so-called Dark Ages in the media, a lot of us may be familiar with certain elements of medieval life, such as mead. But would you be surprised if I said that a commonplace medieval drink actually had an intended medicinal purpose? While doing some preliminary research on medieval recipes, I came across a 14th century manuscript talking about metheglin, a spiced mead. When I started looking into metheglin further, I came across medieval sources that attributed medicinal uses to the drink. However, it seems that these medicinal uses of metheglin were gradually forgotten, as many early modern and present-day scholars view the drink as little more than an intoxicating beverage. So, I set out to determine the legitimacy of metheglin as a medicine according to medieval standards. I did this by looking at food, medical practices, and brewing techniques in medieval Europe. First, I looked at the individual ingredients used in metheglin. Honey is known to be the primary ingredient, so I examined its role in medieval society. I found that there was actually a grading system for honey, with live honey being of the most value. Looking at Susan Verberg's work on medieval brewing, I came to learn that live honey actually contained several strains of osmophilic yeast, which allowed for fermentation in medieval brews. By the 14th century, brewers started to realize that lees from a previous brew actually led to a better fermentation process, and as a result, beginning in the 14th century, most brewing recipes no longer required live honey. However, I came across multiple 14th century recipes for metheglin that continued to call for live honey in addition to lees, suggesting that expensive, high-quality honey was valued as more than a fermentation aid. So I turned to medieval medical texts and remedies which detailed the use of such honey to fix various ailments, including cancer. Of course, herbs were another defining component of metheglin. While the recipes I looked at offer little information on the benefits of each herb, I found other medieval sources that detailed specific uses to each of the plants that's commonly found in medieval metheglin. For instance, one 13th century Italian manuscript attributes medicinal properties to 11 of the 12 herbs called for in a 14th century recipe for metheglin. Based on these findings, I concluded that each ingredient used in metheglin would have been associated with a particular medical need. Medieval medicine was by no means strict, and the presence of unlicensed practitioners meant that medicine was conducted by herbalists and brewers in addition to university-trained physicians. On top of this, medieval medicine often focused on methods of prevention rather than explicit remedies. Considering these factors, it seems very likely that metheglin would have belonged as a legitimate medicine in medieval European society. From my research, I have determined that medieval recipes for metheglin clearly reflect the advice of contemporary medical texts. While later documentation may ignore metheglin's medical uses, the drink existed as more than a simple intoxicating beverage. Perhaps metheglin's actual intended purpose can show us that the so-called Dark Ages were far more complex than is often thought. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Derek Campoli. I'm a fourth-year child and youth major at Trent University. I'm really excited to be talking about LGBTQ issues today. My presentation title is We Exist, the Struggle to be Seen in a Heteronormative World. Thank you. When I first won prom queen at my Catholic high school, I thought that I was finally going to start seeing a shift towards meaningful inclusion and representation in my school environment. Little did I know, 2 weeks later when June started, my school put up a pride flag in support of their LGBTQ+ students. That was taken down 2 days later due to complaints. As an LGBTQ+ youth, it made me feel like everything I had accomplished at that school was for nothing. the fight for inclusion, the fight for representation, the fight to be seen. It was all for nothing. The flag was taken down and hidden away to make everyone more comfortable, while other LGBTQ+ students and I felt invisible and ashamed of who we were. Research shows that education systems are based on heteronormative ideals that make it extremely challenging for LGBTQ+ youth voices to be seen and heard. My undergraduate research examines literature on the experiences of LGBTQ+ youth in the education system. Specifically, I'm interested in research that discusses how school experiences impact identity development. I want to understand how more inclusive school environments can be fostered in order to avoid the trauma that many LGBTQ+ youth face. As I began to look into research, I found that LGBTQ+ youth report feelings of loneliness and isolation due to the significant erasure of LGBTQ+ topics and resources in the classroom. For example, in a study of over 12,000 LGBTQ+ youth ages 13 to 17, they found that 8 in 10 experience mental health issues, and only a quarter of these youth feel safe and comfortable in their own classroom. No resources, no role models, no one to look up to. Just you. Just you in an environment that treats your identity as something to be hidden away. The erasure of LGBTQ+ youth in the current system is just as damaging as condemning the community. This is a systemic issue that has been visible for far too long. Research has shown that LGBTQ+ youth are more at risk for bullying and victimization. There isn't any recognition of LGBTQ+ youth in the current system, which makes these youth hesitant to reach out in fear of being victimized. The main thing that stood out to me in my research is that LGBTQ+ youth as young as 13 report feelings of self-hatred. In other words, internalized homophobia. They describe internalized homophobia as a fear of expressing queerness and expressing anti-gay social attitudes toward the self. Looking back, I have dealt with internalized homophobia my entire life. Not until this year have I been able to openly discuss my sexuality and join this fight for inclusion. 4 years after high school. The effects of the school system took 4 years to unlearn, and even then, I'll be dealing with feeling comfortable in my identity for the rest of my life. If someone, just one person, could have told me who I am is valid, it would have saved me years of confusion. My hope through my research is that I can create a school environment in the future that can make every student feel comfortable, safe, and seen. For too long have we sat idly by and watched the system forget about us. LGBTQ+ rights are human rights. We bleed, we hurt, we exist. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Linda Alede, and I'm a psychology student affiliated with Lady Eaton College, and I'm so excited to be here today talking to you about my project called Working Out a Solution, Exercise Therapy for Anxiety and Parkinson's Disorder. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative condition most often characterized as a disorder of movement marked by arresting tremor, instability, and slowness of movement. Although this description of Parkinson's is correct, it's incomplete. Parkinson's is also associated with a range of non-motor symptoms, such as anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbances. Unfortunately, these non-motor symptoms remain more hidden and under-identified, consequently producing an iceberg effect, in which the identification and treatment of Parkinson's is largely driven by motor symptoms at the oversight of non-motor symptoms like anxiety. Considering that up to 50% of people with Parkinson's struggle with anxiety, this oversight has dangerous implications on their quality of life. What's more, Parkinson's disease affects 1 in every 500 people in Canada, and its global incidence is expected to more than double in the next 20 years. All this signals to an ever-growing demand for a more effective and integrative intervention that addresses both motor and non-motor functioning. Fortunately, exercise is one such therapeutic intervention, and it has been shown to combat both motor and non-motor related difficulties. However, there is a significant lack of literature exploring the therapeutic potential of exercise to alleviate anxiety, in particular in people with Parkinson's. This gap in our understanding is exactly what my project this past year has targeted. Anxiety related to Parkinson's does not respond in the same way that other non-motor symptoms do. For instance, while exercise seems to have promising effects on depression, Its effects on anxiety are much more complicated because the degree of therapeutic potential may be dependent on specific factors of the exercise regime. So, to explore this claim, I reached out to local Parkinson's support groups and I circulated a series of questionnaires that asked people with Parkinson's about their exercise habits. Specifically, I examined how different types of exercises, exercise durations, exercise intensities, and exercise frequencies each relate to anxiety and quality of life. Participants did not have to engage regularly in exercise to be included in my study. Instead, I just wanted to understand how anxiety and quality of life differ for high exercisers compared to low or non-exercisers. Focusing more closely on these aspects of exercise will provide a better insight into the complicated relationship between exercise and anxiety in Parkinson's disorder, and it may allow us to highlight the specific factors of exercise that are most helpful in alleviating anxiety. It's my hope that with this furthered understanding, we enhance therapeutic efforts for people with Parkinson's and provide a more integrative intervention which improves both mental and physical health. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ethan. I am a fourth-year forensic science student in Zoonotic College, and my 3-minute presentation will be titled Proteins, Not Just for Gym Rats. I hope you like it. What comes to your mind when the word protein is said? For most people, the image on the top right comes to mind. This image of a bodybuilder at the gym bulking themselves up in protein shakes and lifting weight. But protein as a molecule is more interesting than just some powder in a bottle. In fact, protein makes up 20% of the human body and is present in every cell in our body. For the last year of my university career, I've been characterizing protein through the use of electrochemistry. So to start off, what is electrochemistry? Electrochemistry is the transfer of electrons from one substance to another, and this mostly occurs in materials that can easily accept or donate electrons, which is the case for most metal. And through this event, we're able to obtain various quantitative value for the specific material, almost like its own little special tag. So now you might be thinking, proteins are definitely not metals, so how can you characterize protein through the use of electrochemistry? And the simple answer is you can, as we simply can't just attach alligator clips onto protein, as logistically speaking, that wouldn't work out. Instead, proteins attached to the metal electrochemistry is performed on, and therefore the material is modified to the said protein, and the quantitative value should also reflect to the protein. But why is protein studied so much? Like I stated in the beginning, protein makes up 20% of the human body and performs essential tasks to help us through our day-to-day lives. But what makes protein so unique is not the tasks they perform, but how they perform those tasks. Beyond its chemical composition, protein purely relies on its shape. And this is crucial, as when proteins are misshaped and their purpose in our body cannot be fulfilled, and an imbalance will occur. And this event is commonly described in a lock and key analogy, as a key will only be able to open a lock that it fits in. One misshaping of the key and the lock will not open. And this is interesting, as most misshaped proteins are typically early signs of diseases that are a result of misshaped proteins. Through electrochemistry, we can characterize the healthy and the misshaped protein through that quantitative value that we talked about earlier, that special little tag. And this can be especially helpful for diseases that can only be diagnosed from a symptomatic perspective, like the case for most neurodegenerative illnesses, like ALS, Alzheimer, or dementia. So the next time you hear the word protein, don't just think of the powder in a bottle. Think about delicate little molecules in our body helping us through our day-to-day lives, not just for gym rats, but for everyone.
Hi there. My name's Emma McGinnis. I'm a student from Autonomy College in the biology department, and my presentation's entitled Physical Activity, Depression, and Anxiety During the COVID-19 Pandemic. How are students really doing? University students are a population who are extremely vulnerable to reduced psychological health, where they exhibit high levels of both state anxiety and depression. Now, this is extremely concerning, as anxiety and depression states can negatively impact students' current and future well-being, their academic and their professional success. Now, since the COVID-19 pandemic has emerged, students have not only faced extensive pandemic-related stressors, but also drastic changes to their education, their social, and their living situations. Consistently, they've reported increased levels of both state anxiety and depression. Now, a potential way to support student psychological health is by promoting physical activity, as this is a habit well known to help reduce anxiety and depression in students. However, before establishing such interventions, the current relationship between psychological health and habits of students must be understood. My thesis aims to do this by determining whether the anxiety and depression levels of students are associated with their physical activity levels during this pandemic. As well, it's possible that students in particular subgroups may be especially struggling during the pandemic, and therefore at a greater need for resources to help improve their psychological health or their physical activity habits. So for my thesis, I'm to determine whether there are differences in the state anxiety, depression, and physical activity levels of students in different degree programs. In order to do this, a cross-sectional study was conducted with Trent University students. It was an online survey to be completed once that collected participants' demographics, including their degree program, used the validated depression, anxiety, and stress scale to measure depression and anxiety levels, and use the International Physical Activity Questionnaire to assess participants' physical activity levels. So Pearson's correlations between the physical activity, anxiety, and depression of all participants will be computed, and analyses of variance will compare the anxiety, depression, and physical activity levels of students in Bachelors of Science, Arts, Business, Nursing, and Kinesiology programs. Data analysis is currently being conducted, and so unfortunately preliminary results are not yet available. However, we do expect to see a negative association between anxiety and depression and physical activity due to their established relationship. If students with lower physical activity levels do in fact have higher levels of anxiety and depression, this would support further research on the use of physical activity as an intervention to help students' psychological health. Differences in anxiety, depression, and physical activity levels are also expected between at least some programs. If these differences do exist, it will tell us which students are struggling most with their physical activity and with their psychological health during this time, and therefore who may benefit most from these interventions. Overall, these findings help us better understand our student population here at Trent and will help pave a way to supporting the health of students during this extremely difficult time.
My name is Arlene Anoniwu, and I'm a fourth-year biomedical science student affiliated with Lady Eaton College. The title of my presentation is Building Technologies for Disease Detection. To the application of proteins and technologies for the detection of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Now, what is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis? It is a neurodegenerative disease that destroys motor nerve cells and degenerates voluntary muscles, which leads to cognitive deficits such as memory loss and language problems. With ALS, there is often accumulation of tRDNA binding protein 43. When TDP43 converts from a liquid-like substance to a gel-like substance, there is excess accumulation in the cytoplasm of nerve cells. This interferes with normal nerve cell processing. Presented before you are 3 individuals well known in their respective career paths that were diagnosed with ALS and have unfortunately passed away. 80% of individuals diagnosed with ALS are often told they have 2 to 5 years left to live. Ms. Ryder passed away 6 years after diagnosis, Mr. Martin 2 years after diagnosis, and Dr. Hawking 55 years after. All 3 individuals first reported experiencing muscle weakness in the hands and legs, which then spread to the rest of the body. ALS is more common than in women, with a ratio of 3:1, and there is currently no effective treatment or cure. It is the most common cause of neurological death in Canada, with over 3,000 Canadians currently living with ALS. A study done in 2016 projected an increase in the number of individuals across 9 regions of the world that would be living with ALS from 2015 to 2040. Now, the purpose of my research is to apply new diagnostic tools to detect the ALS protein using electrochemical measurements, which can be observed on a display monitor. My project employs the use of a sandwich method where a protein sensor binds to a secondary molecule and then it is tested whether the secondary molecule can bind the ALS protein. So first, a protein sensor or film is made on the surface of a gold electrode. A gold electrode is used because it is chemically unreactive. The protein sensor undergoes binding process with the secondary molecule, which is then exposed to the ALS protein for detection. Each can be measured and observed in the form of a graph. So far, I have successfully stabilized the protein film onto the gold surface. The two overlapping cyclic voltammetry patterns shown on this graph are measurements of the protein film before and after 1 hour. This indicates a well-made and stable protein sensor. Future work entails the assessment of the binding characteristics of the secondary molecule and the ALS protein. The successful completion of my project would add to the healthcare applications for the measurement of ALS protein levels to detect and track ALS progression.
All I can say is wow. At 180 seconds each, we just learned 21 new things from these fantastic presenters. And it only took 3,780 seconds, or 63 minutes. So now, after we've got to be inspired by this great student research, you get to play judge. You get to vote in the Audience Choice Award. So we've included the link in the video description below, and we also will have the link available on our website, www.trentu.ca/3MP, and you'll be able to vote until 11:59 tonight. That's Thursday, March 25th. Voting will close at midnight, and we will be announcing the winners of all the prizes, including the Audience Choice Award, in a recorded video, but it will live premiere tomorrow night, Friday, March 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I also want to offer a really big thank you to all the participants for putting in the time to make these videos. It's extra work on top of all their coursework and all the other commitments they have, and you can really see the efforts that they all put into their talks, and I hope you really enjoyed them, because I certainly did. I learned so much, and I'm just inspired by the work that they've done. I also want to express our gratitude to our judges this evening, Marilyn, Michael, and Stephen. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you were wowed like the rest of us, and I know these are hard choices to provide scores for all these talks. I think everyone deserves an award. They were so fantastic. So your job is not easy tonight. We really appreciate your help this evening. Thanks also to the generous supporters of this event, including Academic Skills, Trent Durham GTA, and Trent's Colleges. In particular, I want to thank my partners in coordinating this event, including Autonomy College Principal Dr. Stephanie Muhletaler and Autonomy College Assistant Rachel Glofcheski. We also really appreciate our prize sponsors, the Office of Research, Alumni Affairs, Center for Teaching and Learning, and the Office of the President. Finally, I want to extend my gratitude to you for joining us in this celebration of impressive and varied research by Trent University undergraduate students. Thank you.